Over the past few weeks, thousands of St George's flags and Union Jacks have been appearing across the country on lampposts, park benches, in people's gardens and elsewhere. What started as a celebration of the Lionesses' victory has grown into something else. A grassroots movement fueled by social media with names like Operation Raise the Colours. Money's been raised, cherry pickers have been hired, and in some neighbourhoods the streets are lined with white and red. But not everyone feels the same. Councils have raised safety concerns and the police have opened investigations into graffiti, vandalism against churches and other public buildings. For some residents, the display seems perhaps less like a celebration and more of a statement or even a warning. Critics point to the flags being used historically by far-right groups, while some ethnic minority groups have said that the display makes them feel uncomfortable, unwelcome, perhaps even threatened. National politics too seems to be treading very carefully. The government's own guidance seems to be encouraging the flying of more Union Jack flags as a symbol of celebration and unity. Yet the growing anger over their removal and the clash with flags like the Palestinian or the Pride flag just shows how contested this issue has become. Joining me on Politics Unchained today is Cameron Thomas, MP for Tewkesbury, proud flag-waving veteran, but also critical thinker on the role of flags today. So Cameron, thanks for joining me on Politics Unchained. What do you feel when you see the Union Jack?
First and foremost, I feel quite patriotic when I see the Union Jack, particularly when I see it sort of fluttering in the wind on top of the Houses of Parliament. It's a flag that obviously I wore on my shoulder for over 2 decades in the armed forces, various operational theatres, and it means a lot to me.
I was going to say it means a lot to you personally. Do you feel as though it's yours? Is it your flag?
It's our flag, and I would of course include myself in there. I think the interesting thing about the Union Jack that you might not be able to say about certain other flags is that it very literally represents unity. It is literally the coming together of symbols of historically opposing forces. And I think that stands for something too.
So if it's yours and it's ours and it came from opposing forces coming together, why are we talking about it so much at the moment? It's not so much the Union Jack, is it? It's the St George's flag that's got the attention of a lot of people lately. Why is that, do you think?
Yeah, you've seen the Union Jack flown a bit more recently, but certainly predominantly you're seeing a lot more of the St George's Cross. And whereas I genuinely believe that the Union Jack is an inclusive, unifying force, I can't say that I feel the same way about the St George's Cross. I can go into that.
Yeah. Like, why is that? Because I was going to ask you, you maybe just take a step back. You talked about the Union Jack being a unifying force. Is it possible to have a unifying flag in a country that's as multicultural as Great Britain?
I think the idea of statehood is complicated in itself. But I think that particularly the Union Jack as that unifying symbol means that, yes, it is mine, but really it's ours. I think the idea of statehood is imperfect. You're gathering together under one identity millions, in our case, of individuals who all think differently, we all see the world differently, and you're putting them all under one banner, and that creates its own complexities. But I think that the Union Jack, there's a certain beauty in its composition, which is the unification of the St George and the St Andrew's Cross.
So, I mean, there's quite a lot of philosophy there, I think, about how we might enter into some sort of social contract coming from different perspectives, not because we all agree and believe the same things, but because it kind of works for us if we get together and can unite around a common purpose. Is that kind of what you feel the Union Jack represents?
I think that's what any statehood wants to achieve, but it's imperfect. And I think that we see that imperfection come to the fore on occasion. If you'll allow me to just expand on that. If we go back to World War II, there's no question that Britain as a state, we were victorious on the side of liberty. It doesn't change the fact that elements of society exploited the London blackout, rapists, muggers, looters, and there were elements of British society that were sympathetic to the Nazis.
Yeah.
So statehood is imperfect, and and a flag can be imperfect too. But I do find that the Union Jack is uniquely successful at unifying.
So if the Union Jack is unity, what's the St George's flag on its own? Because we've seen a lot of St George's flag stuff over the past few months, haven't we? Is that connected to this idea that perhaps people are feeling disunified and that's why they've gone for the St George's flag?
People are certainly feeling disenfranchised. I don't feel the same way about the St George's Cross that I do about the Union Jack. And there are several reasons for that. I mean, foremost amongst them, I see myself as more British than English. I tend to feel more English during international sporting tournaments. If England, men or women, are playing in an international tournament, I'm very much an Englishman, and I very much hope we beat the Scots. Everybody else that comes before England. But I find that the St George's Cross has been used as a means to divide and sometimes even threaten, certainly recently. And I find that challenging. I don't feel the same way so positively about the St George's Cross as I do the Union Jack.
So it's been co-opted by who?
Predominantly by nationalists. You'll find in any nation state, the people that most closely identify with the national symbol would be the nationalists, because nationalism demands that you sort of relinquish some of your individual liberties for the greater national sovereignty. So naturally, the nationalists adopt that symbol as theirs. It doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't ours too, but I find that with it having been co-opted by the nationalists, I'm alienated from it somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, granted, it is easier to paint a St George's flag on a mini roundabout than it is a Union Jack, especially if you want to get it the right way up. But yeah, we're seeing some quite prolific statements, aren't we, at the moment from people. Are they all nationalists hell-bent on dividing the country, or do you think there's another story, another explanation behind it?
Those are both parts of the story, and it's really important that we understand both parts. There will always be a certain percentage of a society that you cannot reach through reason. And those individuals will remain opposed to reason, no matter what you do. The risk is that we who try to appeal to regular people will alienate a further 10 to 20% of people if we're not very careful with the language that we use. There are 10 to 20% of British society that are not nationalists, but who might side with the nationalists if they feel alienated by wider society and the leaders.
Yeah. So politicians basically are responsible for this current
politicians, authorities, ultimately the state.
Yeah. The state, like, being too far the other way, or just not delivering on the core things that people expect and need?
Nationalism tends to flare up, for want of a better word, in times of economic strain, in times where hope is hard to come by. And I think we're seeing that at the moment because people had this really brief flicker of hope at the 2024 general election, and have now had to come to terms with the fact that this is going to be a very slow road back to economic growth and things ultimately being better for future generations. That's why we are seeing a lot of resentment rising up now.
I think a lot of people have already concluded, right, you're wrong, and that's just not going to happen under this government, and that it's kind of more of the same. And perhaps we'll only know that if we are another couple of years down the line. But I mean, I hear what you're saying. There's some people who are disenfranchised. There's some people who are never going to be sold because, you know, it's always the problem of the other lot. Aren't the folks that are sort of sneering at flags and demanding they immediately be painted over again also part of the problem here? Have we just become so right on that, like, we're sort of somehow ourselves disconnected from what those flags and symbols mean to people, very, very viscerally mean to people?
Yeah, I mean, that comes back to the point that I made about we've got to be careful with the language we use. We can't be looking down our noses at people. We want to be bringing them to us, not further alienating people. People have every right to feel disappointed with the way things are going in this country. And you're right, it doesn't look at all like we are going to see the improvements in this country, economically, societally, that we had hoped were going to happen. But the real risk here is that feeling of being disenfranchised grows so greatly over the next 3 years that we get something next time that's even worse than the last Conservative government.
Yeah.
Because that's absolutely possible.
Because people are being pushed to the right. They think reform's the only answer.
Well, people feel like they voted left this time.
Yeah.
And that left is failing them. It isn't. It's just that Labour has been pulled so far to the right, it's very much a centre-right force. And of course, people will think, well, we voted left this time. Maybe it's time to move further to the right.
It feels like people are just making a choice, hoping it's going to change. When it doesn't work, trying again. Brexit, last year's election.
Brexit is the bitter irony in all this, because there's a risk now that the country will return to the politics of the man who sold them Brexit.
Yeah.
And people largely in this country now recognise that Brexit was a lie. The promises of Brexit were false. They have not come to fruition, but the risk is they'll vote for the same person who promised that last time.
Yeah.
And of course, the results will be the same.
Yeah. So I want to push you on this thing about feeling that perhaps we're not really in tune with the folks who want to fly the flag. And I don't know, I feel like there's almost a difference. It's not so much the flag, but who's flying it sometimes that kind of gets into people's brains.
You're not far off. I've thought about this. And I think that the difference is respect. It's not who's flying it. It's the reasons it's being flown.
Yeah.
The difference for me between nationalism and patriotism is respect. And that is also the difference with the way I view the flag. If I see an English athlete successful at the Olympics wearing that flag over their shoulders, I feel a sense of pride, the same way as I would as it was a Union Jack.
Yeah. If
I see that flag casually draped over the shoulders of a drunken yob in the middle of a street with a flare stuck up his arse, it's a very different feeling, right?
Yeah. What about flag flying outside a council house, something like that?
No problem. I would prefer it if it's the right way up. But look, it shouldn't be for us, authorities or the government, to tell people you cannot fly that flag. It is their flag. I would ask that you fly it respectfully. You fly it for the right reasons and you fly it properly.
So fly your flag, fly it wherever you want if you're doing it respectfully and you're not, carrying out some other violent disorder at the same time.
If you're not using it to threaten or to divide, if you're not painting it over a roundabout or a memorial or something like that, I don't see an issue with it.
Does that go for the pride flag as well?
Yeah.
If we started painting rainbows on roundabouts, same view.
There's an interesting point. So I hadn't considered that. And I wonder if I'm thinking about somewhere in the UK or perhaps in the United States. But there are pride crossings that have been painted previously. But again, I think the crux of it, what it comes down to, is respect.
Yeah.
Nobody paints a pride flag to have a go at somebody who isn't gay or transgender or whatever.
Yeah.
It's respect. That's key.
So there are people who've responded very negatively to the pride flag and see it as a threat, particularly the more modern version with the trans rights addition to it. And they genuinely feel like their world's being dictated to by other people. What do you think about that?
I wouldn't put a great deal of stock in it. That's not really to undermine people's feelings. They're entitled to that. They don't choose to feel a certain way. They either do or they don't feel a certain way. What I would say is that improving the rights of minorities is not equal to you losing your rights. And I think sometimes people lose that.
Do you think that's true? Because a lot of people don't feel that. They feel like this stuff is all for people that aren't them. Maybe not necessarily at their own cost, but certainly they feel excluded from this world of empowerment and entitlement and representation.
I think historically, white men have had it so well that I can understand why it feels now like everybody else is being catered for and that sort of white men are being left behind.
Well, some white men are being left behind. Quite a lot of them are being left behind, and certainly in some of my communities.
So economically, Absolutely.
Yeah.
But then I wouldn't just necessarily narrow it down to white men. I think everybody's feeling the pinch at the moment.
We're not giving out free money to trans people, are we? It's not an economic redistribution. It's a
that I know of.
Cultural and social thing, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think sometimes people can feel under attack when they're not actually feeling under attack. When they're not actually under attack, it's just that other people are finally getting the recognition and the rights that they should always have had.
Thanks for watching so far. You clearly value escaping the echo chamber and hearing frank discussions that cover more than two sides of the story. Don't forget to subscribe for more like this. So we need to make sure that, let's say, some white flag flying men are allowed to identify in that way without being condemned. Do you think there is a little bit of condemnation, though, isn't there, of people just flying a flag in their house? I'm not suggesting, we're all beyond reproachful thoughts or that we're not aware that we might have certain views when we see things, but I certainly don't say anything or feel any need to say anything to somebody flying a St. George's flag outside their house. Neither do you by the sounds of it, but there has been a certain kind of nose turning by some people towards this behaviour. That's surely part of the problem, isn't it? Is that...
I don't know. I mean, I can imagine that is probably true somewhere, by somebody. I would denounce that sort of sneering, looking down your nose at people like that. That feels there's an element of classism to that.
Yeah.
And that doesn't sit well with me.
But it's true though, it's happening, or is it being kind of amplified? Is it not as?
I don't know if it's happening or if it's being said to be happening, and people are actually taking that as read.
Yeah.
So because I haven't seen it, but I know that there is a feeling that that's the case.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. I have to admit. I'm not aware of anybody. I'm aware of people being, arrested for painting mini roundabouts, but I'm not aware of widespread social condemnation for flying your country's flag on the flagpole.
But there's another risk in the way things are reported, because neither you or I have seen that type of sneering behaviour.
Yeah.
And yet I hear people complaining that it's going on.
Yeah.
So the question is it going on and we're just not seeing it? Or is it actually not going on, but it's being reported as though it is?
I think we could talk about lots and lots of topics of current relevance through that question. I mean, it feels like some other countries have gotten over this. Right? You wouldn't find accusations of nationalism being levied at, say, your average Swedish household. I picked the Swedes because they quite often fly flags outside their houses.
Yeah, and of course they were on the opposing side in World War II.
Yeah,
so that's an interesting example.
Yeah,
but then I've heard that they've had significant migration and that nationalism is on the rise in Sweden too.
Yeah, but they've already got the flag, so that's not becoming part of the currency of that conversation.
No, the flag's everywhere anyway.
Yeah.
Everywhere in the United States as well.
Yeah, that's true. So they're having conversations about nationalism, about immigration, some of the conversations that we're having in this country, into which the flag has been drawn. But what you're saying is that those countries, people flew flags beforehand, so they'll carry on doing it, and it's not become part of the conversation about immigration. Is that your analysis?
Yeah, I think it probably is. I think traditionally this has not been a flag-waving country unless we're sort of getting behind some national effort.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference. I think that all of those three countries, the UK, the US, and Sweden, we're all having the same conversation, but it looks so much more... There's more... It seems that there appears to be more velocity about it in the UK,
yeah,
because historically we weren't flying the flag the way the others were, and now we are.
And that suggests that it doesn't just represent nationhood, it represents values as well. If people are choosing to play that into the conversation about our national identity, conversations around culture, immigration, and even individual identity, that suggests it's not just about the nation state. It's about values and choosing to display which side of an argument you're on, perhaps.
I think so. I do think that, the reason I explained that I don't feel the same way about the St. George's Cross as I do the Union Jack is because the way it is often flown, and this is one of those cases. The reason that the flag is being flown increasingly in this country is as a message. But I interpret that as it's divisive and it's, occasionally threatening. I've had people coming into my inbox and my WhatsApp telling me that they're unsettled by it.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I think that's the point.
But do they not just need to get over themselves? Because this is just a flag, and we can't say that we should be flying pride flags, but not the St. George's flag.
No, because I think the intent is different. Yeah, as we covered before, I don't think that the pride flag has ever been flown to cause offence to anybody, to threaten anybody, or to oppress anybody. But I do feel that in this case, the message is more sinister.
Is it? So the person who feels like they want to make a statement about their identity, and rightly or wrongly, we're in an era where identity politics is, if not core conversation, certainly high stakes currency in a lot of the conversations about the world and our place in it. Is the intention to threaten, or is it just a statement about what people feel is important? Flying a St. George's flag, that is.
If that was the case, then why weren't these flags flying 6 months ago? And that's what it comes down to for me.
Okay.
This activity, this recent activity, perfectly corresponds with the national dialogue, which has become more about migration and nativity.
Nativity, which is a problematic concept. This is a multicultural country.
It is.
So it seems strange now because that hasn't changed. Yes, we've got boat crossings and migration, but like Britain's been a multicultural country for my entire life.
It has, and you'll really struggle to find an English person, even a British person with a completely white European DNA.
Yeah,
certainly white English DNA. But I just want to go back to that last point. Yes, we've been a multicultural country for a very long time, but we've also been an island state that has fought off or lost to invasion after invasion after invasion. And I feel as though the British mindset will have been affected by that for so long that I think that is why there has always been a level of skepticism in this country about migration.
Yeah. The St. George's Cross has become really quite detached from that sense, I think, of self-reliance and independence and defensibility. For some reason, because, as I said, we've been a multicultural country for a very long time, people are feeling like a minority in their country, even though there's just not.
But I think you can also recognise that migration now is higher than it has ever been in living memory.
Yeah.
Let's not pretend that's not the case. I don't see it as the threat that certain other elements of society do, but it is a fact.
Yeah.
It's also a fact that our leaving the European Union has had a direct impact on that because of the Dublin Agreement, which we've now left.
Yeah.
The statistics correspond perfectly.
Totally. Yeah. We left the EU. We've got much more migration as a direct result because we're not part of the same scheme that we were before.
Well, when I talk about the hideous irony about this whole thing, really that's at the centre of it.
Yeah.
Brexit was this promise that we'd take back control of our borders.
Yeah.
And the precise opposite is actually what happened. So heaven forbid the profits of Brexit should ever find their way anywhere near power again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's dangerously close to happening. And the people that profited from Brexit are probably not in this fight at the moment dealing with any of the issues that are facing the country right now.
They're not being challenged on it often enough, either.
Yeah. Yeah.
How often have you heard in the House of Commons or in the media those proponents of Brexit being challenged with that very statistic?
Yeah.
Rarely, if ever.
Yeah, I think that's immensely fair. Back to flags, though, because people were let down by Brexit on the terms that they probably supported it, certainly on the terms that were made about immigration and being able to control it. It doesn't seem like waving a flag as a result necessarily is going to change that, but people are clearly attaching themselves to a certain set of values. And, if you look at what's going on social media, a lot of the kind of self-organizing groups that are putting up flags in places where, maybe not everyone would agree is an appropriate place for them, are standing for something. We're not quite sure what it is. What of their cause do you sympathize with?
I understand why people feel disenfranchised or alienated from our political system.
Yeah.
You only have to look at the results of first past the post in the last several elections, and particularly this most recent one, to recognise that 60% of people did not get the MP that they voted for, or the party that they voted for. But you asked there about what are people looking for. I spoke previously about how there are 10% of people you cannot reach, but there's a further 20% of people that we could push in the wrong direction if we're not careful.
Yeah.
And what that 20% of people are looking for is a positive message.
Yeah.
Because the message that they're currently attracted to is the simple message, but the only one they're actually being given.
Yeah.
They're not being given an economic alternative to send them back.
Yeah. Yeah. So of the motivations that people are driven by to fly a St. George's Cross, you don't share them, but your analysis is you can relate to them feeling like stuff isn't working.
Yeah, look, I don't share that feeling, that sentiment, but I understand it. And I suppose the reason I don't share that sentiment is because I am hopeful. Yeah. I believe that there is a better way than to vote negatively. And I really do believe that the vast majority of people in this country would respond well to a positive message. Yeah. But they're not getting that message at the moment. They are hearing one very simple and very wrong answer to the problems they're experiencing.
But they are experiencing problems.
They are. Of course they are. People's cost of living is no better now than it was under the Conservatives.
Yeah.
I mean, it might feel slightly better because we don't have an 11% inflation rate at the moment, but costs are still going up.
Yeah.
And the government isn't helping because its taxation solutions are always harming somewhere else on the line.
Yeah.
There has to be a better way, and nobody seems to be talking at the moment about what I think is the most obvious solution to the negative message, and that is wealth equality, or as we are currently experiencing, wealth inequality.
Yeah. So do something about wealth inequality. People won't feel the need to identify with nationalist movements.
No, because if you address wealth inequality, you can bring people back up from the poverty line and give them that sense of hope. Not only give them the sense of hope, but they will begin to live that sense of hope.
How much of this is just because we're British and we're a bit icky about people wearing their values on their sleeves, do you think?
I don't have a problem with people wearing their values on their sleeve. If you're inclined to nationalism, wear that on your sleeve. I'm a very, very proud liberal. I genuinely believe that we can have a better future in this country and incorporate everybody. I genuinely believe that.
Yeah.
But I've got to find a way of getting that message out to people because they are just not hearing it at the moment.
So you're a flag wearer. You served for 2 decades wearing the flag on your
our Union Jack
flag.
Absolutely.
You get the
fictional theatres.
Yeah. And you put your life at risk to defend the flag. And you have a articulate difference of feeling about the Union Jack compared to the St. George's Cross. You see the St. George's Cross as, perhaps at the moment at least, the rise of its use being a function of dissatisfaction and possibly even intimidation.
Yeah, I feel that St. George's Cross has been diminished. I would love to feel the same way about that flag as I do about the Union Jack. It's not there at the moment, but right. It can be. It can be if we make the economic situation better for people and show them there's a better way. When you do that, less people are flying that flag for the wrong reasons and more people will be flying it for the right reasons.
And there are other people, I think, who perhaps don't wear the Union Jack even, as a badge of pride because they feel it represents, tyranny and oppression and
it does.
Britain. Right.
It does.
Right. Does it? Right.
Absolutely. It represents our history. Some of it is brutal. A lot of it unjustifiable through the lens of modern thinking.
Yeah.
But we can't pretend that it doesn't stand for that.
Yeah.
That is a part of our past and we have got to reconcile with that.
Yeah.
It can be representative of that past and still be representative of what Britain is today.
Yeah.
I said before about how the Union Jack represents a unity of two opposing forces, right? The English and the Scots. Despite everything that went before, those two forces came together and they compromised.
Yeah.
And if the flag stands for compromise, then it also stands for the trust between those two parties and hope. And I think that's how I view it, hopefully.
It also stands for integration, doesn't it? Because aside from the trust, which we see the effects of the ritual around that trust, still in our jobs as MPs with the black rod and the ceremony around Parliament. Not that really, I think, is going to stop the Scots from breaking from the Union, but that's part of that represents that history. But it's also a symbol of integration.
Certainly.
Do you think that part of this is that we've got a multicultural issue in the UK and we're not as integrated perhaps as the flag?
Great question. So yes, the flag stands for integration and reconciliation, right? And if the English and the Scots, despite everything they went through, can reconcile, then we can reconcile with whomever, despite whatever has gone on. And I think that's a really strong statement. In terms of integration, look, I've got a Muslim family, Somali origin, that live next door to me. First time I walked past their front door, I saw a bunch of men wearing that sort of traditional Middle Eastern garb. And I realized straight away, I need to go and chat with these people. I'm not going to let any assumptions sink in whatsoever. I'm going to make a friend of that family immediately.
Yeah.
Very quickly learned that the wife supports Arsenal. I support Tottenham. Despite that, we got on really well, right? But we have a great relationship now based on every time we lose to them, she'll make fun of me.
Yeah.
Bridging that gap, that first step, it takes courage and it takes leadership to go and knock on that person's door. Now, you're hearing from the right wing, leaders on the right, a lot about how people don't want to integrate. You're not seeing them be the first to cross that divide, because the fact is they don't want that divide crossed. They want to keep people apart and arguing with each other. Look at the way their solution to our problems in 2016 was to cut ourselves off from Europe and give the French two fingers from across the English Channel. And look how that worked out. But instead, you get around the table with people and you bring them to your side.
Cameron, I sense that you've got a great deal of passion and pride in our flag, certainly the Union Jack flag. Would you like it to be widely known more for the sorts of things you've associated with it? And what do we do with the St. George flag in the meantime?
I will shout from the rooftops that I am a patriot and I love watching the Union Jack fly from our Houses of Parliament. And I love the way that the world sees that flag. That flag is one of the most universal symbols of unity in the world. So I'll shout that from the rooftops, not a problem at all. But the more you bring people to our side and marginalise the nationalists, the far right, the more people are flying that St. George's Cross for the right reasons.
Cameron, thank you so much for being so candid about your views. I think politicians spend so much time trying to remember what it is they're supposed to say. And I think everyone's enjoyed hearing whether they agree with you or otherwise. That's not the point. The point is we've had the conversation. And thanks so much for coming on. I really enjoyed that chat. I felt it was full and frank, and I love the idea that the Union Jack represents overcoming division and coming together. It's just a message of hope, which I think we need in this time when things seem so divided and divisive. Don't forget, if you've got thoughts on this, please leave your comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to see and hear more conversations like this.